Hello, everybody. So it is Thursday. It is 8 o'clock. So it is special guest time. So tonight in the Path Light Thrive Hive, we have Sam Ward, who is going to talk about her lived experience of bipolar disorder, which I will allow Sam to explain because she knows a lot more about it than I do. I know a little bit about it from my studies and my mental health first aid courses, but Sam's the expert because she's been living through it for many years. So before we bring Sam in, just to let you know, if you have any questions or comments or just want to say, hello, I'm here, you can just put them in the comments box. And where's my thingamy bob? There we go. So if you go to that address there, https://streamyard.com/Facebook, then you can give StreamYard, this software that I'm using, permission to use your name so that when you submit your comment, we'll know who it is. And we'll say, thank you, Bob, for your comment. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. So what else do I need to tell you? So yes, if you'd like to give you some money, that would be great. Thank you. If you find that you're getting some benefits from what goes on here, it's all voluntary. All the people who help are volunteers. And if you want to support us to keep it going, that would be very much appreciated. So there's two ways you can do that. You can buy me a coffee for £3. And I promise I won't spend that £3 on coffee because I don't like coffee. But every little helps, as Tesco said. And the other thing you can do is subscribe. You can become a member and you get various benefits from doing that, including discounts on my mental health first aid courses, priority booking for my coaching and support, and a couple of other things as well, which I can't remember, but it's all on the Hive. So you can go to buymeacoffee.com/thrivehive and either buy a coffee whenever you find like you've had some benefit from a session, or you can subscribe for £7 a month, cheaper than Netflix. So that's that. And one more thing, if you feel like you've got some people that you know who would benefit from being here, then please just invite them in. You can just click, there's an invite button, I think. Just invite your friends on Facebook. Or you can just share the group link with your wider networks, put it on LinkedIn, put it on Facebook, tell your mate, oh, go to this Path Light Thrive Hive, it's dead good. And bring them along, the more the merrier. It's been lovely the last couple of weeks. We've had lots of people joining from the kind of holistic well-being and counselling and psychotherapy and personal development space. Lots of people who support other people. And they're coming in to share their knowledge and experience and also to learn from what goes on here. So that's really lovely. So welcome, everyone. All right, that's all of that stuff. And let's bring Sam in. Mm-hmm. Hello, Sam.
All right.
I am very well, thank you. How are you today?
Yes, I'm surviving.
Surviving is a good answer.
That's my phrase that I use all the time. Just plodding along. Yeah.
Yes. Nice to get a real answer to that question rather than I'm fine, thanks.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. I'm not very good at saying I'm fine, thanks. I'm possibly told that I'm a little too honest sometimes, but I do kind of think, don't ask me how I feel if you're not interested in the real answer. Yeah.
We were talking about this, weren't we, last week when sorry, I think we were both talking at the same time then, but last week we had this conversation, didn't we, around when you're at work and people say, how are you? There's kind of two different ways you can approach that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also that thing where, you know, if you come back after a holiday or Christmas is a good one as well. That convention of having to say, yeah, I had a lovely time and, you know, la la la. And actually sometimes you don't have a great time. And there's almost the feeling of pressure to just leave out the bad stuff and just focus on the good, which doesn't sit right with me anymore. It used to. It doesn't work now. So maybe just less people will ask me how I am.
Maybe. Don't ask Sam how she is. You'll be there for half an hour and she'll tell you lots of dark stuff.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that? You know, if someone does ask you, how are you today? And if you're not having a good day, or you haven't had a good Christmas or a good holiday, what's your approach now?
I tend to, I mean, again, it depends on the kind of the extent of the mood that I'm in. But if I'm in a particular type of mood, I will literally be brutally honest and just go, well, this and this and this and this. So, which is obviously quite a confrontational way of dealing with things and isn't ideal. I suppose it's trying to find a balance between being honest about how you're feeling, but not kind of pushing people away at the same time. And sometimes that's not always possible. So, yeah, some wise person said to me that it might be a good idea just to kind of say, do you want the long answer or the short answer? And yeah, I think, just it's not a great day today, actually, is probably, that's sufficient. I don't need to offload everything else, because
And
often
then,
that leads to tears.
yeah, and tears are okay, but maybe you don't want to go there in a workplace environment.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think the issue that can then be if you can't find a balance between kind of being true to yourself and being honest, but also kind of protecting yourself a little bit. There can be a tendency for some people to then only see your flaws, or the things that the kind of maybe not so much negative aspects of your personality, but the kind of the more authentic parts of your personality. That tendency to be honest about what's going on for me can, if you're confronted with that a lot of the time, I can understand why people might then decide to label me as a miserable person or an obstructive person or whatever, because I think that sometimes the negative aspects of a person's personality can overshadow the positives. So yeah, it's a really tricky thing in a workplace. And luckily, because I've been in my workplace for 15 years, and kind of learned, I suppose I've just had the luxury of being able to learn how to cope in that particular workplace. So yeah.
Having supportive colleagues helps, I imagine.
Yeah, not all of them, and actually I did. So one of the things that I wrote down when I was getting ready for this evening, but something that I did a couple of years ago, things where I wasn't going through a particularly pleasant phase. Things were kind of heading on a downward turn, and that can manifest in like real irritability and a lot of kind of tearfulness and anger, and just, I suppose, what people would classically call kind of like that unhinged type presentation, just really up and down and all over the place. And I got to a point where I just got so conscious of everyone's reactions to me that in a staff meeting I asked for some time, and I announced to everybody, actually, what you're witnessing is me. It's my bipolar disorder. I'm going through a rough patch. I'm really, really sorry if I'm being unpleasant or confrontational or just hard work. But I think you all need to know that this is going on for me. And I announced it, and actually I was pleasantly surprised that apart from one or two people, there was kind of an incoming of support, and not the wrong type of support either. The kind of like, oh, I didn't realise that was what was going on for you, and what can we do to help, and that sort of thing. Which, yeah, surprising and reassuring. So there we go.
That's really
it's
good to hear.
for everyone in every workplace. That's the thing.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people in the talking, helping mental health professions advocate for is, and as a mental health first aid instructor as well, we're trying to change the conversation in workplaces, remove the stigma, and get people talking and get people saying, how are you today? And if you say, actually, I'm having a really tough day, sorry to hear that. Is there anything I can do, or do you want to talk about it? Just normalizing and supporting.
And not just like, I mean, obviously, I'd then kind of put that out there, but not trying to kind of make myself look like some sort of, depression angel or something. But I do kind of have a bunch of Post-it notes and stickers and things that I have on my desk. And if I am aware that somebody's having a tough time, or there's been an office altercation or something like that, I might just kind of go up to somebody and just put a little sticker on their screen, like it was something encouraging, or just write them a little Post-it note and say, do you need a cup of tea? Because we can go and get a cup of tea. It'll be, and I think the more that you kind of model that kind of behaviour, the more likely it is that you're then gonna, I mean, I'm not doing it so that I will get something back, but just by putting it out there, by showing that if you behave like, if you offer help and support, that's a good and positive thing for other people, means that it just improves the environment, doesn't it? It just makes it a safer and more supportive place to be in. That's the ideal, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm pleased you've had mostly that experience at work. And I realise we've kind of got ahead of ourselves, and I haven't allowed you to introduce yourself. So do please introduce yourself, Sam.
I am Sam. I know Paul from, God, it's got to be 25, that I can't even begin to say it, approaching 30 years. And I'm currently living in the southwest, but I'm Welsh. Not that you can hear that in my voice. And amongst other things, I have bipolar disorder, but I think in the little introduction that I did on the Facebook page, I've just, as much as it's like an inherent part of who I am and how I behave and how I react to things, it's not the thing that defines me. There's more going on here than just a mental health situation. But that's not to say that it isn't a really tricky thing to navigate sometimes. Other times you wouldn't even realise. But I don't know if that really worked as an introduction, because I wandered back into the bipolar stuff again.
Okay.
I mean, other things are that I've got a husband and a little boy, and the place that I've been working at for 15 years, I work with disabled teenagers, so kids on the spectrum, and just kind of various disabilities and needs and things. Do that part-time, and then the rest of the time I'm generally kind of doing a bit of crafting or listening to music, just the usual stuff, going for walks, being outside in nature, all of that sort of thing. So just a fairly normal, bog standard person, really.
We're all unique in our own way.
Indeed. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yes, I like what you said there, Sam, about, although bipolar is a big challenge, it doesn't define you. It isn't all of you. It's just something you have to cope with.
Yeah. And I think I'm reminded of it every day, because I do take medication for it every day. And I've tried not being on medication, and that's not the way forward for me personally. And that's fine. So it's something, but it's something that it's been part of my life since I was 23 as a diagnosis. And that kind of a mental health situation has been there probably since I was a teenager. So it's almost, so on the one hand I'm saying it's not something that defines me, but on the other hand it's quite hard to separate me from the bipolar because it's just all so entwined now. And I think I did go through a phase where I was like, I can't bear this. I don't like being like this. I feel like I'm not in control of myself and my emotions. Why do I have to be this person? I just think, the older that you get and the more work that you do around getting to know yourself and your reactions and your responses to things and all of that. The more that you do that, the more you become comfortable with the person you are, and then the idea of the bipolar or not the bipolar, or what person would I be without it, or whatever, that just kind of fades away. It doesn't completely go, but it kind of settles a bit more. But again, I wouldn't want to walk into a room and go, I'm Sam and I've got bipolar, because, I'm more than that.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting how you have this wrestle almost about who's Sam and what part of Sam is the bipolar and what part of the bipolar is Sam, and where's the line.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you've done a lot of self-reflection and going inwards to try and retain a sense of self, maybe.
Yeah, definitely, because while getting the diagnosis was really useful as a way of explaining some behaviours that had been happening, and as a way of explaining behaviours that have happened since, it can have disadvantages. That label can have disadvantages as well, because in some situations, like for example my situation as a parent, advocating for my child when people know that I have bipolar disorder becomes a completely different thing, because the tendency with a lot, and I can see lots of sides to every story, which is why I get my head into a pickle all of the time. But I would say, and this is a generalization, that there are many professionals who work with children who would have been told about that toxic trio: mental health, domestic violence, and alcoholism, and would therefore start to put pieces of a puzzle together when they find out that a parent has bipolar disorder, wrongly. Because just because I have that label, it does not mean I'm unstable. It does not mean that whenever I get heated about something that I'm reacting because it's not a symptom of my mental health that I'm being passionate about something. I'm not being manic just because I'm saying, no, you can't do that with my child. That's not okay. So that can be a real struggle. But then on the other hand, there are certain situations where you can mention it, and you can get, not that I would do that in a cynical way, obviously, but where actually having the diagnosis facilitates getting some support that you wouldn't get if you hadn't been diagnosed. So it's very much the whole thing's just a massive double-edged sword, and I do get very frustrated by it a lot of the time.
So how do you cope with that frustration, Sam? Do you have some strategies, some support network, things that you do to try and release that frustration?
Yeah, I've got, so basically I spend quite a lot of time kind of outdoors, and kind of the whole nature cure thing really, really works for me. So being able to, especially this lockdown situation, the fact that the weather up until the last few days has been lovely has meant that I can just go off for a wander, and I take my phone with me and I just find things. If I see something and it makes me smile, I take a photo of the thing that makes me smile. And just, it's hilarious, my photo stream on my phone, because it's just literally close-ups of flowers and insects and sheep, lots of sheep, things like that. But and I am that person that will walk along in the countryside and see something and just start talking to myself about it, or just I don't know, it's just it's allowing yourself to step aside from the stress of what's going on in your life, and to be able to go, yeah, but there is all this that's happening as well, and isn't this amazing? And that's not to say that I can do that successfully every day. And that's, it's not to say that I can even motivate myself to leave the house, on certain days. But I know, as I like I said, as I do more kind of work and more growing and learning about myself and my reactions, I am more able to see that there is more than what's going on in my head. The other thing that I do, that I've had to do as a bit of kind of self-protection, is to kind of maintain a bubble, like a circle around myself, in terms of really trying to be aware of what I have control over and what I absolutely cannot control. So there is so much stuff to worry about. It's just too much. It's too much. And if we were living 200 years ago, we'd be in a little bubble in our little village or whatever, and we would be dealing with stuff, much less stuff. It might not have at that time appears to be less, but it was just a much more narrow focus. And even the word narrow is not right, because what I don't want to say is that I have to keep my focus really narrow. It seems like a negative word. But just by recognizing that if I can change that or work towards that happening, but all of these things that are going on in the news that I cannot affect, I'm going to have to put them to one side. It's almost a selfishness, but it's a self-preservation as well. So yeah, running
makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So
it's just the only way.
Yeah. So the twin cures of nature and maybe stoicism, that letting go of the stuff that we can't control.
Yeah, definitely. Just kind of, I used to, when things were getting really, really bad, I would find that I was, incessantly watching the news, reading articles and having piles and piles of articles that I needed to read and get through, finding out all of this. I should be giving money here and giving money there. I should be doing that. I should be being a volunteer. Just taking on so much that there wasn't any space to look after me. And now that I start with myself, now that I am a bit more selfish about my time and about what I do, I can look after myself, and then I can be a more effective person for other people, because I'm not consumed by all of this stuff that's going on. And that kind of behaviour that I was describing, that's the kind of worrying kind of precursor to mania anyway, which I just can't go there.
Yeah. Okay, we'll get into that in a minute, and I'm just going to offer a light challenge. I like to offer a light challenge. So you characterized those behaviors, those self-care behaviors, as selfish, being a bit more selfish. And I would just challenge that language and say, actually, it isn't selfish. It's something you need to do for your own well-being. And that old adage of you can't pour from an empty cup. So you've got to fill your own cup up by taking pictures of flowers or doing some meditation or dancing to some pulp or whatever it is. And then you can pour your cup for your son and your husband and your workplace. So just a little reframe.
I think it's almost like we need to reclaim some bits of language, actually, because selfish is seen to be such a negative word, and actually it doesn't have to be. It just means doing something for yourself. And there's another one that always really bugs me. It's when people get called oversensitive, and I don't necessarily think that that's a useful way of using language either, because you can't be oversensitive. Sensitive's a thing, and it can be a positive thing. I'm pleased that I'm a sensitive person. I just don't think it's possible to be oversensitive, and I don't think that's negative. So you're quite right to pick me up on that.
Lovely. Right, we've had a couple of comments come in. So first one, I'm not sure who this is from, but it's going back to the sticky notes at your workplace. What a great approach towards work colleagues. I would really appreciate it if my colleagues had put little post-it notes of support on my PC. There we are, post-it notes. So yeah, it's a simple tip, isn't it? But it can make all the difference to someone's day. So little tips like that we can all take away and take into our workplace, and by making those little adjustments ourselves, other people might pick on them as well.
No, it's just it's such an easy thing to do as well. And I think if we all spent a bit more time just stopping and looking around at how other people are feeling and reacting, we would naturally be more empathetic anyway. That it is, having talked about how I sometimes respond to the "how are you" question, just a simple rewording of "how are you," right? Is everything going okay? Or just like finding different ways of expressing that you are genuinely interested in another person, but always being aware that if you ask that question, you need to show people that you're interested in the answer to it as well. Otherwise there's no point, is there?
Quite. I'm picturing some people that I used to work with when I used to work in an office, and there was one guy in particular he was very much a power character, very much an ego-driven, successful type, and very good with people on a certain level. And he would, each time he saw me, he'd be like, "Hi, how are you?" And before you answered, he's actually gone. And he's turned his back. It's he doesn't really care how I am. He's just projecting some kind of image. Anyway, Hayley has said, "Your bubble totally makes sense to me." Totally in capital letters. It's hard enough with our own minds without dealing with things we have no control over too.
Absolutely. There we go.
Aye. So if it's okay with you, Sam, what I'd like you to do is kind of explain a little bit about what bipolar is as you understand it, and then if we could perhaps go into your history about where you think it has come from in you. But yeah, just in case people don't understand what bipolar is, how would you characterize it?
So basically, it used to, even when I was diagnosed, it was called manic depression, which they've moved away from that as a term to describe it, but actually it's probably a more useful illustration of what it is, because it is a tendency to have periods of very, very low depressive mood and periods of high or manic mood. But within that, it's not like a literal zigzag. There are also periods of steadiness, or there might be periods where you're a little bit low, or there might be periods where you're just kind of a little bit more effusive than you would normally be. So just reaching over. I have nobody's going to be able to read that. Oh, hang on, that way. Right. I have a mood scale that I can refer to. And so, for example, there's like, it's all out of 10. 4, 5, and 6 are a balanced mood right in the middle. Right down at the bottom on 0, that would be a severe depression, suicidal thoughts, that sort of thing. And at 10, you've got your mania, which is like you've got total loss of judgment, maybe psychosis, hallucinations, all of that sort of stuff. So I think people tend to think of it as you're either up or you're down. It's not like that at all, and it can be affected by stress. It can be affected by an accumulation of different things. It's kind of like a bit of a rocky old roller coaster sometimes, and then other times it's just kind of there in the background and makes you maybe a bit more sensitive than other people. And for me, having a diagnosis and being able to understand what on earth it was that was going on in my head was really, really useful. So shall I go into the whole, how did we come to this conclusion?
Yeah, just before that, I'd like to just dig a little bit deeper, if I may, into what your kind of daily, week to week, month to month experience is. So you mentioned that you're on medication at the moment, and does that kind of, I'm guessing it doesn't just keep you on the flat, does it just kind of reduce it from zigzag to a bit of a zigzag?
So they call, so lithium is one of the mood stabilizers, and that's exactly what you just described. So it's never going to take everything away. And if something's sufficiently, it's almost like if all the planets aligned, if there were loads and loads of stresses, if life-changing experiences, that sort of thing, it wouldn't matter how much lithium I was taking, the illness would still take me high or low. So I take that every day to try and keep me as steady as possible, and luckily that tends to work. If anything, so there are some types of bipolar where people do kind of swing from big highs and big lows, not from one to the other, but they get the massive highs and the massive lows. I tend to get the lows, and I will get them as a result of an accumulation of things. I'm very vulnerable to stress, and I can see the triggers that will send me spiraling down. And because I tend to go down rather than up, I also have an antidepressant. So the two of them together seem to do the work of battling against things getting too bad. And then I also, alongside that, and this has been an ongoing battle, and now I'm paying for it because it's impossible to get it on the NHS, but I also have regular counselling. And that's just, the value of that is, it's indescribable really, because for me to be able to just know that on this date in the next week I will be able to unpick something, and be in a safe space where I can be challenged about some of my ways of thinking as well. That is what helps to maintain me as well. So I'm kind of one of those people that needs the meds and the talking therapy side by side. And as I've got more, as I've done kind of more work on myself, I'm now much more able to recognize when I'm going down. I find it much less difficult to recognize when I'm going up, and it doesn't happen very often, but when I'm going up, I tend to initially just think, wow, this is nice. I'm feeling really cheerful, and I have done for quite a few days. I'm going to do all the things. And yeah, it's normally other people that will notice that happening rather than me. So I think, and that's the danger, I think, with the going up and the mania, is that it can, until it goes wrong, it can be quite exciting and fun. But when it goes beyond, it's terrifying. I find it terrifying. I'm not one of these people who would come off my meds deliberately so that I could experience a mania, because it's horrifying. That loss of control is wow. Sorry, I think I might have rambled then.
No, that was all good. Thank you. Yeah, so just before we get into the history, would you like to share some times where you have gone super high and have gone super low, and what that was like for you, and maybe if you're aware of what triggered it, if anything, as well?
Well, I think maybe the best thing is just to sort of kind of go through the timeline that led to the diagnosis, because that was the first experience of being high. So kind of basically quite a tricky teenager, had a lot of anxiety, really struggled in secondary school with just that kind of, all the social aspects of it, and the pressure, a bit of perfectionist, all of that sort of stuff, and started getting periods where I felt as though I was outside my body, where I felt as though I was watching myself over my shoulder, and having periods of time off school. And my GP, in his wisdom, had diagnosed those as ear infections. So I was just getting loads of antibiotics, but not getting any kind of useful help. So swept under the carpet, and then managed to get through A levels and ended up in Manchester. The pressures of being somewhere new and doing a course that was different, and new friends and all of that sort of stuff, managed to make it through the first year, and then came home in the summer. My mum was diagnosed with cancer, and my head imploded. I started to, I was very irritable, very forthright. So I would, where I had always been very careful about what I said to people, and worried about how people would react to me, that stopped completely. I was effing and jeffing at members of the family. I was just kind of, I remember running off into the local woods in the pouring rain with no socks and shoes on, and just disappearing, and nobody knowing where I was or what they could do about me, and somebody eventually seeing me emerging from the woods and putting me in a car and taking me to the doctors. All in the meantime, my mum's not well, I'm seeing adults around me falling apart, all of that sort of stuff. So clearly a very stressful thing. But for some reason, the decision was that I should just be sent back to Manchester. So I went back to Manchester and embarked on my second year, and had some counselling, and whatever. It was as if it had never happened. It all completely swept under the carpet. Then, as you know, I did teacher training and was a teacher for a short period of time. Doing the usual teenage student stuff, and hanging out and drinking, and kind of comforting myself with a series of boyfriends, and being codependent and all of that sort of stuff, just being really obsessive and pushing people away. And then I did about 18 months of teaching, and I just fell apart completely. I started to hallucinate. I thought I can laugh about it now because it is absolutely peculiar. But at one point I thought I was God. I thought I could stop time. So I was walking around just going, it's all right, everyone, I can stop time. Where do you want me to take you back to? I also thought I was invincible. So I was walking up to just random strangers and just saying, you can hit me, you can do whatever you like because I feel no pain. Just like, I thought that black taxi cabs were following me. And then at one point, you know the film and the book Trainspotting, right? I thought I was Irving Welsh. I thought I was a bald Scotsman. And I was expecting people to come up and congratulate me for the quality of the writing that I was doing. So yeah, it was just classic, absolutely classic. And I was also watching. I could see people aging before my eyes. I convinced myself I was in a coma and that I was 50. I'd been in a coma for 30 years, and I could hear people talking. Yeah, anyway, it was horrible. And a couple of my friends managed to trick me into going to the doctor. The doctor immediately said, "Yeah, can you get us to the psychiatric unit in Withington?" and they got me over there, and then spent 4 or 5 hours trying to persuade me to voluntarily have an injection of a tranquilizer to sort of just knock me out, basically. And thankfully, my friend who was with me at the time eventually managed to persuade me to voluntarily have the injections, though I didn't, because they were threatening me with a section. And I did not get sectioned, for which I am forever grateful. But I was kept on a voluntary basis on the psychiatric ward for almost 3 weeks, which is the most terrifying experience of my life. It was just shocking, horrible. Because luckily the medication that they were giving me brought me back down fairly efficiently. And so I was then just in this place where I was just kind of looking around going, oh my God, what has happened to me? And also that awareness that I was there on a voluntary basis. If I tried to leave, I would be sectioned. So not that voluntary then. And then so from that point onwards, you don't get a great deal of support, I have to say. They didn't diagnose me at that point, but they let me out after this period of almost 3 weeks, and against everyone else's better judgment, but I thought it was a really good idea, I decided to stay in Manchester and not go back to my mum and dad's house. And I managed, I think it was about 3 or 4 months, and then it just all went tits up, and I just had to abandon the life that I'd made in Manchester and up sticks and go back home. So it was quite huge, and it was quite huge at the age of 23 to have all of that happen, and to kind of watch your parents going, what? I mean, I can't imagine what it must be like as a parent, although maybe I can slightly, but that's another story. Watching your child kind of struggle so much. But yeah, I mean, luckily they were very, very supportive. And I got the diagnosis a few months after the whole breakdown, if that's what you want to call it. And then they tried out various, first of all, kind of tranquilizing medications, which I didn't like because they were I was just a bit, just put like a wall between me and reality, and slowed me down so much. So in the end, they tried lithium, and even though some people do struggle with it, for some reason it just works for me. So I've been on it ever since. And that, you know, I mean, that has its issues with it as well, because you've got to be careful about your kidneys, and you've got to be careful about your thyroid. My thyroid is now knackered as a result of taking the lithium. But to end this ramble, I now am able to look back and be grateful that happened when it did, because that has given me the last 23 years to work with it. I know what it is, I know how it manifests, and I've been able to find what works with me. And it's almost as though now I'm kind of better equipped to cope with the next thing and the thing after that, because I now have the ability to look back and go, well, that was a pretty awful thing, almost swore then, that I managed to get through one way or the other. And if I can get through that, then I'll probably get through quite a few things. I'm just doing your job for you now. I've just seen that Becky Housley has said, do you or have you ever had a CPN to support you in the community? Now, I think this is one of the issues with bipolar disorder and with any mental health issue, where the person who has the diagnosis is also articulate and intelligent. I am articulate and reasonably intelligent, and so I can go into the doctors and go, I'm not feeling very well. I know that I'm going high. And because I can articulate that, I don't need the support. So quite a lot of the time, I have to then almost outwardly exaggerate the symptoms in order to get the help that actually should just be given to me anyway. It's really, really difficult, because and one of the other things that I get told is that I have a lot of insight, and that's great. I've got loads of insight into it. I understand what's going on with me. Doesn't mean I don't need any help. It doesn't mean I don't need that counselling. It doesn't mean I don't need to see a psychiatrist. So yes, I have had a CPN in the past, but what I've noticed is in the last 7 or 8 years, the cuts. So it's not, it's not anyone else's fault, but the system, but the cuts to mental health and the NHS in general mean that I went from, this time 10 years ago, I had a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a CPN, and also a social worker who, like a psychiatric social worker. Gradually, those things have peeled off. I'm not any better or any worse than I was 10 years ago. I'm just maintaining, going up, going down, suffering stress, asking for help. But the help that I am now offered is very, very different. It's the IAPT stuff. I can't remember what it stands for.
Increasing access to psychological therapies.
Yeah, so I'm increasingly getting told that I should go on a course where I'm doing group work, etc. And I'm like, actually, that's quite patronising. I've had this diagnosis for over 20 years. I know what I'm dealing with. I know what will work. Could you just facilitate that instead of asking me to sit in a room and do the same stuff that I've done hundreds of times before? So it's kind of, I find it frustrating, and I find this frustrating in all sorts of different realms, education as well, that the system doesn't deal with the individual. and the kind of the strengths and the needs of each individual. And so just because I've got bipolar, I'm not exactly the same as the next person with bipolar. Just because I've got a mental health issue, it doesn't mean that I should be treated exactly the same as the next person with a mental health issue. And also, just because we've all got, those of us who do have mental health difficulties, that's not any less valid than a physical illness, and can be as debilitating. And I can't bear the fact that just because I don't look ill, I mean, sometimes I do, sometimes I look like I've been dragged through a hedge, but because I don't present in a certain way, I don't need the support. Sorry, rant over.
It is a common issue with lots of people who have mental health issues, that the system has been cut drastically, and now it is a case of trying to fit lots and lots of square pegs into one or two square round holes, and it doesn't work. So I'm sad that you're having to go through that, and hearing what happened when you were 22, 23. I felt great sadness around that, Sam, and I suppose back then I was totally ignorant about what was really going on.
To be fair, though, I think at that time, and I was kind of reflecting on that, because I thought, this is going to come up, and actually that happens when I knew you. But to be honest, I don't think anyone saw it coming. I think it was one of those situations where it was just one thing and then another thing and then another thing, and then the stress of teaching, and I kind of shoehorned myself into teaching because I couldn't think of anything else to do. But it was such a bad fit for me. And I mean, I think if anything, the only signs that were there were just that kind of that real neediness that I had, and that kind of, that thing where you were talking about alcohol, that thing that we were doing on a very regular basis, which was just going out and dancing ourselves into oblivion. And in a sense, I think some of that was just classic student behaviour, rites of passage, that sort of thing. Some of it was about escapism, and it was about kind of running away from what was going on in my head. And the same with the neediness around relationships, as one of your friends could probably testify to, just being like a limpet with people, and being so needy that they're just like, no. Sorry. So yeah, it's it was crap, but it's nobody saw it coming. Honestly, nobody did. And then it was there, and it was like, wow, okay. And I can look back now and find it quite amusing in a way, because it doesn't fit with the person that I see myself as. So I see myself as quite, controlled and controlling, and it's almost as though I'm talking about a different person when I talk about the sorts of, the antics that I go up to. I think the danger with mania is that it can feel liberating. It can feel like you've released a part of your personality that you've not been allowed to. It can feel like you found the meaning of life. Luckily, I'm the sort of person who is very suspicious of that sort of feeling, that kind of loss of control. And I think that's what kind of keeps me on my meds, and that's what makes me recognise when it's all going a bit wrong.
So that awareness that you spoke of, Sam, it's having the intelligence and the eloquence and the understanding about what's going on for you and around the illness itself can be a bit of a double-edged sword, because
Yeah.
access to services, like you said, is they say, oh no, she's fine, she's stable and intelligent, but also I suppose it's given you a lot of insight and coping mechanisms. So, like you say, you've got counselling, you've got your medication, and you've got your strategies like going into nature, dancing, all the other stuff, which keeps you relatively stable.
Yeah. And you know, the other things, I know that I can't work full time, so I worked that out quite a long time ago. I can't work full time. I need to have time with myself. And I think, you know, going back to those student days, I think that's what I was running away from, is time with myself. I didn't want to know myself because I was too scared of it. Now I recognise that what I need in that kind of classic, almost introvert way, I need that time to kind of decompress. If I spend time with people, I then need to have time alone. You know, certain situations will be too much, and so if I push myself into them, I then have to kind of factor in time to recover from it, you know, that sort of stuff. So, you know, and things like not scheduling too many different things in, not leaving things till the last minute, which is a nightmare because I'm a proper procrastinator. But it all comes back to that being kind to yourself stuff. You're just kind of recognizing that maybe you can't do all the things, just do some of them. So yeah,
doing the best you can. And as you say, this whole experience has built resilience for you, because if you can get through that at the age of 23, you can pretty much get through anything. And Amy's asking, are you glad you found out so young?
Yeah, definitely. It almost felt like a massive weight off my shoulders, because like I was saying, I'd felt different. I don't know if that's the right word. I knew there was something going on with the way that I was thinking and perceiving things from kind of teenage years, but I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't kind of fully appreciate that there was, you know, something going on with my brain chemistry, and that it wasn't just that I was completely malfunctioning as a person. So yeah, it was a relief in a way to find out that, you know, there's a reason that you've been struggling, and then it's kind of unpicking that as you get older, and being careful not then to blame every struggle on the bipolar, because a lot of the time it's just life, it's just day-to-day life that is happening, and you're not reacting because you're bipolar, you're reacting because that's how anyone would react. So I suppose, you know, that awareness of what's the illness and what is just daily stuff, that's something that I've had quite a long time to reflect on, which is again really useful. So yeah, I do see myself as lucky, definitely.
And another thing that struck me about your story, Sam, is that, as with so many people who have bipolar disorder, it takes years to get an accurate diagnosis, because the GP or the psychiatric person, whoever it is, needs to see you in both states and recognise that up and down. And when most people, when they're high, they don't go and seek help because they feel great. They think they're God. They think they're Irvine Welsh.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is like, I'm fixed. I'm okay. I'm not miserable anymore. This is fantastic. Yeah. So it is a tricky one. There's something on there just briefly about it's thingy personality. What's it called?
Borderline
BPD,
personality disorder.
borderline personality disorder. Yeah, I've looked at the some of the criteria for that, and yeah, I completely agree. There are similarities, but I don't know enough about it. All I know is that I did raise it once with a psychiatrist, and he was sort of saying that the bipolar is definitely a mental health situation, and that the borderline personality is, they define them differently because one's about mental health and one's about personality. But I don't know that that's a particularly useful way of looking at it. I do think, I think it's a throw of the dice as to who you speak to on some of these things. One psychiatrist might have, I probably fit the profile for various different things. It's just that this one has worked, and the medication that you give for this one has worked for me. But if you took me back to when I was 23 and I was seen in a different place by a different doctor, I do wonder whether I would have, maybe I would still be on the journey to the right diagnosis. Because it's not, I call it witch doctory, which is a bit irreverent, but it is a bit like, it's like a stab in the dark, isn't it? You can't get inside someone's mind. You can only observe and listen to them, and then draw a conclusion, and that might be the right conclusion, and it might be the wrong conclusion, and it might be that you need to add other things into that diagnosis as well. It's just all so subjective.
Yeah, absolutely. My own understanding of borderline personality disorder, for what it's worth, is that it is around attachment issues, which usually go back to childhood, and that manifests in a lot of issues around boundaries, issues around maintaining relationships. So it isn't necessarily around your mood shifting, although that can be a factor, but it's more about the relational aspects, and feeling unsafe, insecure, like you need somebody to be there. Yeah.
Which, let's face it, no mental health diagnosis is a joy. They've all got, so many different strands mixed up in them that you have to try and navigate your way through. I do think borderline personality disorder is another one that's due for a bit of a overhaul in terms of what it's called, because again, in the same way that manic depression came across as negative connotations, I think borderline personality, even the use of the word disorder, is a struggle for me. I think.
Yeah,
I don't
they
think
are
when we're disordered, we're just different. And saying that somebody's personality is a disorder is a shocking thing to say. Clearly named by someone who has not had a mental health issue themselves.
The stigmatization of a label can impact people really negatively. And you may be interested to know that BPD is being rebranded.
Oh, is it?
So it's now emotionally unstable personality disorder. So it's still got the stigmatizing bit on the end.
Yeah. And also, sorry, I'm like fascinated by words, but like the unstable, the unstable also has a kind of a negative aspect to it as well. It's a shame. They should employ some language specialists when they come up with these diagnoses, so that they make it a bit more kind of neutral and less of a negative perception, less shaming almost.
Yeah, someone with some compassion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe we could call them stuff like Jarvis and Bagpuss.
Yeah, definitely. Both of whom are featuring in my room. Not quite. Where's Jarvis gone? Oh, there he is. There.
Hello, Jarvis.
Yeah.
Lovely. which has made me think of one more question before we draw to a close, if that's okay. So I don't know if you're aware of the terminology around externalizing. So this is so for people who don't know, it's if you have some kind of mental health issue, you can give it a name. So if you have depression, you could say, oh, it's Brenda. Brenda's here today, which can be a really good way of disassociating yourself from the illness, as you were talking about earlier on, saying it's something that's kind of part of me, but actually it's separate as well. So I wonder if you do that at all, Sam.
Yeah, but I probably wouldn't be able to repeat the kind of things that I would refer to the bipolar, because it's usually something that expresses extreme frustration and crossness, shall we say. But yeah, it's quite often it's something like that bleep has returned, or do you know what I mean? To just kind of, and I suppose that in a way that probably is quite unhelpful to attach such negative terms, because if it was something innocuous like Elvis, maybe I'll start calling it Elvis, or I don't know, Tim Burgess, then maybe I could come to terms with it a little bit more.
Defend it.
Jonathan.
You can't not like Tim Burgess.
Exactly, it's impossible. Impossible. Bless him, he gets better as he gets older. Sorry.
Lovely. Okay. So is labelling things becoming less important in mental health now, and more about the symptoms people experience? Don't know, Becky. I don't know. What do you think, Sam?
I would love that to be what was happening. I don't know that it is, though. Yeah, you do wonder, like, is the label more useful for the people that are doing the labeling than it is for the labeled? But then you get things like, struggling to get another topic, but struggling to get a diagnosis for my child and getting told that the thing that we know that he has cannot be diagnosed because it's not in the DSM-5 and it's not on the, so I don't think we're anywhere close to not having the labels, but if we could be closer to them just being used for the purpose of just saying you fit here and you fit here, and then forget about them, that would probably be a lot more useful. That was a bit waffly, wasn't it?
Well, no, I think that's right. And for me, ideally, every individual should be treated. That's not a word. Treated as an individual, and not just a collection of symptoms or a tick box exercise in the DSM. But I suppose, from the mental health professionals' perspective, they need some kind of structure and framework to be able to say, okay, this person meets these criteria and this is what the manual says we have to treat them with.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, I'm going to offer something, because you mentioned your child there, and a friend of mine recommended this book to me recently, and I'm finding it a very lovely book, and I thought you might find it useful as well. And in fact, anyone who has children, maybe this is required reading whilst the baby is in utero. It's called Parents Tao Te Ching, A New Interpretation, Ancient Advice for Modern Parents by William Martin. So that's my book recommendation of the day.
Yeah.
Feel free to have a look at that. It's lovely. It's about finding the middle way as a parent rather than underparenting or overparenting. So subscribe to that.
The eternal struggle, it seems.
Well, Yes, indeed. Everything's a balancing act, isn't it? Everything's a bit like a seesaw in all things.
Absolutely.
Okay, so final comment. I don't feel a stigma, but maybe that's because I've come to terms with myself most of the time now. I love myself just the way you are. That's lovely, Hayley. I feel very much for anyone who's still struggling every moment of every day, like I did for a long time. Yeah, great stuff. Lovely that you've got there, Hayley, and that's testament to your hard work on yourself and the support you've had around you, I imagine, as well. So, Sam, is there anything else you would like to discuss? Anything you feel is important that we haven't covered?
Not necessarily. I feel like I could talk for like another hour about various topics related, particularly parenting with a, like, look at my notes. Okay, so blah, 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 blah.
Shall we have you back for a part 2?
Why don't you put that to the group? Because I don't want to force myself on everyone again. But I've kind of found it quite enjoyable, and I'd be happy to do it again. Maybe, or like, I don't know, maybe you could put it to the group and see if there are any like specific questions or something. I'd be quite interested to see what other people think about the issue of parenting when you have a mental health condition, and you know, the baggage that causes in your brain, and the worry, and you know, all of that sort of stuff. I'd be quite interested to explore that, but I don't know whether that's relevant to enough people. What I would like to say though is that this group has been very, very useful to me. I kind of feel like I'm in a supportive environment of people who understand, and that is a rare thing, and a very valuable thing. So thank you to you, Paul, and to everyone, because yeah, you're doing a really important thing.
Very glad that you find it supportive, Sam, and thank you for saying that too. I hear you, and I feel you.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed the session. I could listen to you talk all day, Sam. Round 2 from a parenting perspective. Thank you so much. And yes, please come back. Very informative. So that's 3 out of 3 yeses. That is democracy in action. You're coming back for part 2. Parenting with a mental health issue. That's great. Okay. Well,
no doubt.
Sorry, say that again. I missed that.
Parenting with a mental health issue and other wafflings. I think that's what we call it.
Yes. And again, I'm going to offer a light challenge that it isn't waffle. It's very valuable.
I know, self-deprecating, and like some habits are quite hard to break.
Yes.
That's the song, isn't it? Is that Chicago? Hard habit to break.
Yeah, good grief, I've not heard that song since 1984 or something. But yes.
Talent.
Yes.
Applying song lyrics to day-to-day life. I should put that in my introduction.
Lovely. Sam, thank you so much for your time, but more importantly, really eloquently and openly sharing your experience, which has really touched me as well as informing me, and I'm sure will offer lots to the group. So blessings to you, and thank you very much for everything you brought.
Thank you very much. I've had a lovely time. I've enjoyed myself.
Great. Smashing. I think I'll just end there. I normally play a song, but I'm not going to play a song. I think I'm just going to stop there because that feels right. So, folks, what day is it tomorrow? It's Friday tomorrow. That means we're having a connection, support and meditation session at 8 o'clock on Zoom. Do come along. Everyone is welcome. Just talk about whatever you want to talk about. Parenting with a mental health issue if you want, or bagpuss, or Jarvis Cocker. Whatever you want to talk about is fine. And yeah, that's it. So enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Thank you once again, Sam, and take care.
Right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
What do I do now? Leave studio?
You can leave the studio. I'm going to end the broadcast anyway.
All right.
You hang up first.
Okay. Beef.
Thank you, folks. See you soon.